By the way, before I start on deep well injection, I'm going to answer that question about blending water and et cetera, et cetera. It turns out that our current requirement of 100 milligrams per liter is at the exit pipe of the water treatment plants. So no matter what you put in a river, it is not going to make any difference on that particular requirement. Remember that even though we are putting water in that is higher than 100 milligrams per liter, the farmers in Ventura have never gotten water over 100 milligrams per liter because as it flows west past the Piru Creek, it's blended with Piru Creek water, and on the other side of the Piru Creek, it's below 100 milligrams per liter. But deep well injection, this is a big thing now. You might have seen the newspaper article about the over 500 people from west of the 5 at a meeting to protest the fact that the sanitation district is going to put a deep well injection site right by their property. Actually, it's on the 16th hole of the Tournament Players Club golf course. So I guess, that makes it even more important. But on March the 10th in 2015, you know that our city council members who were for this before they were against it, voted to request the sanitation district abandon that plan. And I thought it was very interesting, especially if any of you watched that particular meeting where they were sitting there for I don't know, a half an hour making motions upon motions so that they wouldn't put too many people, they wouldn't put their sanitation district appointees in an untenable position. When 10 years ago, they were coming to the city council to ask what the city council's position was. So the vote that they did really came after a lot of testimony from a standing room only crowd. And you got to understand, here all of these people have just instantly taken to this issue. And so when you see hundreds of residents, many of them from Stevenson Ranch and Westbridge, packing a meeting, you got to know that there's a lot of concern. But I think the biggest concern the council had was they'd already hired lawyers. So they knew something else was coming as well. And I think that it's extremely comforting to find that we have residents on the west side that didn't just say, don't put it in my neighborhood, go shove it over somewhere else, put it in someone else's neighborhood. But they turned around and said, you know what, we don't want you to shove it in someone else's neighborhood. This is too dangerous, it's too risky, we don't want it anywhere in the Santa Clarita Valley. So here on March 11th, they show up at the sanitation district. And the same kind of thing happens, and the sanitation district, who, in a way, it kind of upsets me because I thought that the way things were supposed to be is that you, as an official, especially an elected official, you turn around and you're supposed to come to the meeting, keep an open mind, listen to the staff report, listen to all of the community input, and then make a decision. So for the second time in 2 days, Lorraine West, before one word is spoken, comes up and makes the motion to move the site off of its current location and go look for an alternate site. And the rest of the meeting simply was a dog and pony show where everybody got to express their opinion. There was no staff report, and they ended up moving it off the site. Now the question is, why did this become such a big issue now? We've actually been talking about this for a couple years. Why all of a sudden, after the major issues that we've discussed about chloride, did deep well injection become such a big issue? And I think for a lot of this, it has to do with the fact that we didn't really understand what deep well injection was, and we kind of got waylaid by the fact that if you go look at the information in the original EIR, there's not a lot of information about it. But as the West Ranch and west of the 5 neighborhoods looked at this, they started researching. And that's what the drilling rig would look like. That would sit there for a couple of years. And they weren't that happy about it. But if we want to talk about why this became such a big issue, we got to go back and do a little bit of historical work. And remember that in the original EIR, there were supposed to be 4 alternatives, okay? And in those 4 alternatives, the first one was to do reverse osmosis and build a brine line to the joint outfall system. And that consideration was eliminated. They said, oh, well, it's $20 million more expensive, so we're not going to discuss it. So even though they presented it, they refused to consider it. And then there was alternate 2, which is the one that we're working on now, which changes the disinfection method to ultraviolet, adds reverse osmosis, and disposes of the brine by deep well injection. But the details of deep well injection were not exactly clearly presented. And one of the things about it is that if you look at it and you look at these, this is even a document that comes from a document that was shipped out to everybody in the middle of January when this started to become an issue. And they show this picture of deep well. And so you look at it, and on the bottom of it, if you read the fine print, you know, you always have to read the fine print. This is coming from the government. It said, well shown straight rather than deviated for simplicity. And I believe what it really should have said was, no, well drawn straight rather than deviated for deception. Okay? Because it's not a straight well. And so we'll talk about exactly what it is in a little bit. But it's not a well. It's not, when you heard them talk about deep well injection, they didn't say deep wells, did they? No, they said deep well. It's not one well, it's 7 wells, okay? And they don't all go straight down. They're bored horizontally. So we'll talk about that a little bit. It creates this huge area of where this brine is going to be located. Alternate 3 was UV, RO, and then dispose of the brine by trucking. And although that was a very inexpensive solution, it did take a lot of trucks, and the cost, the recurring cost, was very high, and they found all kinds of excuses. They got someone, the Board of Supervisors say, no, we don't want you to put all those trucks on the road, as if they really had an option to say that. So they didn't consider that one either. So now we have only one option on table 1, and then we have the one that they actually wanted to do. And for the life of me, I don't understand why. Alternate 4 was divided into 2 halves. The first half of it was to just use UV disinfection and then blend the output of our water treatment plants with up to 6 million gallons a day of water just to be thrown away in the river. And if that didn't work, oh, I forgot. And then we were supposed to drill wells in the Piru Aquifer and pump water down to Ventura, all on our nickel. And then if that didn't work, we had to build the RO plant anyway and build a brine line, build an effluent line, an output line, all the way to Ventura and provide them with water. That's just totally insane. I mean, why would anybody want to do that? But that was favored by our city council. Our city council came up and talked for it. CLWA came up and talked for it. The Chamber of Commerce came up and talked for it. The Valencia Industrial Association came up and talked for it. We are in a drought, and we're going to give away 6 million gallons a day of water? It's nuts, okay? So all of a sudden, at the last minute, given those 2 choices that they had, and knowing that they had been pushing heavily to do option 4, they collapsed and said, oh, you know what? We're not going to do option 4. We're going to do option 2. Surprised everybody in that meeting, right? It was a total surprise. But I believe that when they did that, we relaxed. It's a point that even though they changed their mind the 11th hour, we were mainly concerned with the 100 milligram per liter requirement, with giving away our water, and we didn't really investigate really that much about deep well injection. So now here it comes by. They made that decision in 2013, and here in October of 2014, they all of a sudden discover that the site that they had for deep well injection was, as they put it, no longer available. What it really was, it was not acceptable for the whole time anyway, because it was in a sensitive ecological area. It was an area that the county had committed to preserve oak trees. And if you've been looking at this for the last 2 years about drilling, don't you think you would have noticed them when you walked through it? So 2 years later, they say, oh my gosh, we can't do that. So when the issue of deep well injection and the concerns about it came up, I felt kind of, like I had been bagged. And so I said, why didn't I see this before? Why are we looking at this now? And I went back to the original EIR, and I read the initial EIR, and when it talks about deep well injection, it doesn't give you many details. So again, what happened, we focused on the issue itself. We didn't want to lose our water, and we failed to really look about what deep well injection is. Now that we know what we're discussing, I think that the sanitation district staff, our city council members that sit on that as directors, I think their credibility has been severely damaged. I don't think if they come and tell it, whatever they tell us now, we're not going to believe it. I mean, I'll tell you in a minute. I went to a meeting last night where they sent Sand District people out here to go talk to us about this issue, and it's hard to believe what they're saying, because I think that they've really put a spin on this that just wasn't true. And if you remember that meeting where you were sitting in the city council chambers on the 10th, and Marcia McLean said, our mayor says, thank the West Ranch people for coming out and saying, I'm really happy now that we have a group of intelligent people that can help us fight this issue, as if nobody ever noticed it before. This is a slide from 2010. This is when we filled a room. You remember that the limit at that time was 117 milligrams per liter, and the city or not the city, but the sanitation district had come up with a plan that would only cost us $500 million in capital, and God knows how much to run it. It was going to increase our sanitation bill by 5 times. And for some strange reason, the community didn't like the idea, mainly because we were going to get nothing out of it. So last night, when the guy from the Sand District was there, he said, you know, one of the reasons why we're in this position is because the community has always turned down any rate increase that we've asked for. The community has never turned down any rate increases that they've asked for because the process doesn't allow you to. It's been the directors that have turned them down because they realized the pressure that was being put on them. Remember, this is a Proposition 218 assessment district, so when the directors come around to you and say, I'm going to raise your rates, you get a protest ballot. And in order to win that protest ballot, you need 50% plus 1 of the eligible votes. That's not of the people that voted, but of the eligible votes. You realize how hard that would be to get? It's never happened, not here in Santa Clarita. Then we hear a constant pitch, a furor from our elected officials that say to us, oh, it's not our fault. Not our fault. It's the state's fault. It's the federal government's fault. You know, it's anybody's fault, but it's not our fault. And they blame the Clean Water Act of 1972. Well, the Clean Water Act of 1972, just so that you understand what I'm talking about, is a federal law. It was passed for regulating discharges of pollutants into waterways. And at the time, we had some very polluted waterways, and they were trying to clean it up, and they've done a pretty good job of it. But the way they do it is they created, in the Environmental Protection Agency, you can't have anything that doesn't increase the bureaucracy a little bit more, something called the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, and that creates permits which controls the discharges. However, in certain parts of this, you can have the state administer those permits. So if you qualify, the state will do it. So California passed what they called the California Porter-Cologne Act. And that created the State Water Resources Control Board. And that board has the ultimate authority over state water rights and state policy, meaning that the 9 regional boards that are in the different areas, when they create standards, they have to get the state board's approval. So what happens to you is that you have to get a permit, and you have to show, they call it a basin plan requirement, which is really what the quality of your water is. And you have to show that you're taking into consideration the beneficial users, who's using the water. And the regional boards are the ones that set the limits, and then they have to go to the state and get them approved. And they issue those discharge permits. So here in California, we have one Water Quality Control Board at the state level. It has 9 appointed members on them. They're appointed by the governor. And we have 9 regional boards. We're in region number 4, the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board. It has 7 members. It controls the permits for Los Angeles and Ventura County, plus a small bit of Kern and Santa Barbara. So what's about our sanitation district? Our sanitation district, by the way, is a county district. Can't be a city district, because in the Proposition 218 rules, you cannot create a Proposition 218 district outside of the jurisdiction of the agency that's creating it. So the city can't do it because it encompasses more than the city. And they pledge, this is their pledge, to protect public health and the environment through innovative and cost-effective blah, blah, blah methods of taking care of things. So that sanitation district encompasses essentially the whole Santa Clarita Valley, except for these 2 pockets, which we talk about in Newhall Ranch and in Vista Canyon Ranch. And it's formed as a 218 district, and it plans and implements the Santa Clarita water methodologies of complying with the permits. And on that board currently, by law, is the Santa Clarita mayor, an appointed Santa Clarita council member, and an LA County supervisor. Now understand that they are the ones that determine how we comply with these requirements. Deep well injection has nothing to do with the federal government, has nothing to do with the state. It is totally the decision of our board. So if you remember, in 2008, to show credibility, Santa Clarita Valley passed a ban on water softeners. That was supposed to solve all of our problems. And surprise, it didn't. Now, if you listen, if you were at that March 10th meeting, you could have heard Lorraine West talking about, well, maybe if we use different products, different shampoos and cleaners, but you know what? None of that's going to fix the problem the way it is. On May the 26th of 2010 was when this was presented to us as a $500 million solution, and those were some of the rates they were talking about increasing, and it just I guess it was in 2009 rather, and so also in 2009 we were told that it was to prevent crop damage. So we're told this is the part of credibility. In one case, it says, oh, we're supposed to maintain the historic chloride rate in the river from 1978. In one respect, we're told, no, it's really to prevent crop damage. And in one case, it's to talk about beneficial users. And if you were at the sanitation district on the 11th, you would have heard Mr. Unger, who is the one of the principals in the water board, in the regional water board, say that they were going to allow the Saugus treatment plant to let out 150 milligrams per liter of salt in their effluent because there were no beneficial agricultural users in the area. And so it never makes sense. We asked a lot of questions. We never got answers. And again, it was a protest of that rate. So that's what drove all those people there. And so we have been talking about this, and we have been fighting it for a long time. On October the 30th of 2013, the sanitation district approved alternate 2. And that was to drill 7 wells. The wells go down at least 1,500 feet, and then they change and bore horizontally. So understand that now they have to go down another 1.5 miles, and they're going to go horizontally at the same time. So the steeper the angle that they bore, the farther out they're going to have to get before they reach that depth. So you're not talking about discussing the effect of injecting 500,000 gallons of brine a day in one location. This may be in a field that is as big as 4, 5, or 6 miles. And they're going to create that pool of brine in that large area. On January of 2015, the sanitation district released their supplemental EIR to move the well to this alternate site. I spent 2 hours the night before last trying to find a newspaper article or an article online that said that the original location was no longer available and we're moving to a new location. And I could not find an article until after the West Ranch people were complaining. So if someone, I heard someone say to the West Ranch folks, well, how come you didn't know about this? Could be because no one told you, right? But we'll find out more about that. So on March 11th, they voted for a new site, and they sent out this information sheet with a picture of deep wells. Now, realize this is not a single well. They talked about 5 or 6, but now they're talking about 7. They're talking about horizontal drilling. And just think of what this might mean. Certainly, it might mean possible groundwater contamination. And certainly, in the information that was brought forth by the people from West Ranch, they brought articles talking about whether it could induce seismic events, particularly if it was done in an area that had multiple faults or single faults. And let me think about this area for a minute. All right. Also, they brought a letter that was written by insurance agents that indicated that your earthquake insurance has clauses in it that says if an event, a seismic event or any other kind of event is human induced, they're not going to pay. So if this thing is out, 6 miles in circumference, and you're anywhere near it, and there's a seismic event, and now what are we going to end up doing? We're going to end up arguing with the insurance companies or litigating against them because now on that very expensive earthquake insurance, they're not going to cover you. It's going to be interesting. Lastly, they talked about property values being impacted. Because if you are in an area where this brine is being, where the wells are either are going underneath, or where the water is, the brine is being released, you're going to have to disclose that. And if you were out buying a nice new house, you know, really beautiful, it's the house of your dreams, you plan to stay there for at least 5 years like most California people, would you buy a house that had a brine injection, having brine injection underneath it? No, I don't think so. I think it's gonna, it will affect them. So I went to this meeting on the 17th. First of all, by the way, I went to 2 meetings on the 17th. The first meeting I went on the 17th was to the West Ranch Homeowners Association, where they had their lawyer talking to them. And they asked the lawyer, what happened at the March 11th meeting? And he said very plainly that what they did was they suspended work on the EIR. And that's all they've done. And they've directed the staff to go look for another site. Could they return to the site that they have now? Yeah?
I thought they withdrew it.
No. They suspended effort on the EIR. That's all they've done legally. They could come back to that site anytime they wanted to, if they wanted to. And then we went to the sanitation district, and I have this on tape. I didn't tape the lawyer. I figured they would get really nervous if I did that, right? Lawyers don't like to be recorded. But I went to the sanitation district meeting. I have that recorded, Steve. So if you listen to the sanitation district representative, he said exactly the same thing. He said what they did was they suspended work on the EIR, that they directed staff to go look for alternative sites, but that when they come back and review alternatives, could they move back to the original site? Absolutely. There's nothing that prevents them from doing that, other than another 150 people going and visiting one of their meetings. So I thought it was very interesting. I'll put that on YouTube for you. So what we need to understand is that deep well injection is not mandated by the federal government, the state, or the water boards. Is an actual decision, it's an implementation decision that has been made by our sanitation district, okay, by our city council people that sat on that board. Originally it was Lorraine and Ferry, and it's been Antonovich the whole time. And then it was Lorraine and Bob Keller and Antonovich. And now it's Marcia, Lorraine, and Antonovich. And those are elected officials. In my way of thinking, they have the primary responsibility to act in the best interest of us, their constituents, and they must be held responsible. They should be held responsible for every decision they made. I turned around and didn't just say don't do it. By the way, I made an alternate suggestion, and when I made an alternate suggestion, I said go back to alternate 1. You've already authorized collecting $130 million. Why not go ahead now and look at alternate 1 again? Because part of your discussions with the Regional Water Board was to eliminate the blending pipeline between the 2 sites, something that the public had asked for all through the EIR process and told couldn't happen. But it was a brilliant brainstorm that they had at some time after that. And that saves $11 million. Now, I found out something last night that I was wrong. It's not a $5 million grant. It's a $7.5 million grant. But the grant is only to be used for UV disinfection. And option 1 doesn't have UV disinfection because they decided to make the pipe a little bit bigger was cheaper than implementing UV disinfection. But now, if they look at it again, maybe with an extra $7.5 million kicker, that may no longer be true. But so I got that information before. So that would mean that it would equal $139 million capital cost to ratepayers without the grants. And that still is 7%. That's a 7% capital increase. So my question is, if someone's asking you to pay $130 million, wouldn't you pay an extra 7% to make sure that no one was injecting brine underneath your house? I think everybody would. And that would eliminate deep well injection completely, there would be no impact on the Santa Clarita Valley. Now, everybody understands this is a scam. I think that we shouldn't even give up, even after we go through this. We should still, our sanitation board discontinued the study in 2005 and never did field trials. They paid for the part that was done. The water board said, you know, we don't need any other information, but they couldn't have stopped our guys from doing it. We did it on our own. And so when you hear somebody that I'll go unnamed saying we're doing everything we can for you, I'm beginning to think they're doing everything we can to us. Because they're not studying. But even if we were to do a field trial now, because we got till 2019 before this is going to be operating, and even if we built a plant and spent the $130 million capital, stopping it at that point would still save a lot of money because there's another $200 million to run it. And we don't need to do that either. So we asked a lot of questions. Here, I've asked these questions now 3 times. How much has the sanitation district already spent site 1 and 2? How much money have we wasted? And how much money do you expect to spend on siting a new location? And then because we keep hearing, and if you watch the video from the sanitation guys last night, hear them saying that their experts say, well, there's no chance of a seismic event caused by this kind of an issue. So if the sanitation district is so sure that deep well injection would not cause damage to property owners, how about they commit to indemnify our residents for any financial damages caused directly or indirectly by that well? Well, what do you think the answers were? That's it. No one wants to talk about it. It's not a valid answer. So from my standpoint, deep well injection is too risky for Santa Clarita Valley. There's handouts in the back from that were provided by the people from West Ranch. There's a possibility of man-made earthquake events. There's a possibility of groundwater contamination. There's a possibility of voided earthquake insurance, and there's a property value impact. I think deep well injection just has too many unknowns. There's too many things we do not know about it. And even if it worked, when you ask, well, what's the capacity of the well? Will it be able to handle 50 years of 500,000 gallons a day? And they don't know. So if you read the EIR and you believe it, they're going to spend $42 million on this deep well plan. And I got to tell you, if the wells end up full, they had spent another $42 million doing it somewhere else. And it'll be more than that because they'll require a pipeline to wherever they're going. So my answer to everybody is stay alert, continue to fight. This issue is far from over. You're going to hear about this for a while. And it's your money, it's your property, and I think we need to protect it. So are there any questions?